crazy. We live in a very hostile society all of a sudden. I don't know if you realize it, but if you just drive down the road, you can feel it. You know, people I was driving somewhere the other day, and I look in my rearview mirror. It's a yellow light, so I'm slowing down, and I see two cars fly past me. They pass me. They go pass through the red lights, and I'm thinking, holy cow. Really, I prayed for that. There would be a cop right over that hill. Like, that was my prayer. Like, Lord, where's the cop when you need him, right? But we live in a very angry-filled society. And here's what I want to do. I'm going to show you this video, and there's going to be no sound on it, but you tell me if it's a happy video at the end or a not happy video. All right, watch this. I heard someone say, that's me at work sometimes. Okay, I'll admit it. But man, that's a lot of unhappy people. A lot of unhappy people. And anger is on the rise in America. In a national survey of anger in the workplace, 42% of respondents said yelling and verbal abuse took place where they worked. 29% admitted they themselves had yelled at coworkers. Nearly 1 in 4 of employees, they suffer from chronic anger in the job. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, I know you probably won't believe this, but I'm going to just say it. Road rage is the #1 traffic problem. Sideline rage with parents behaving badly at youth sports events is such an epidemic that 76 of the respondents from 60 high school athletic associations said increased spectator interference is causing officials to quit. According to the Josephine Institute of Ethics, 43% of high school and 37% of middle school boys believe it's okay to hit or threaten a person who makes them angry. And nearly 1 in 5, that's 19% of girls, actually agree with that. Now we have people going nuts on the airplanes, and we're like, oh my goodness. Like, I was on an airplane last week, and this guy comes and he goes and he's late for his plane, and he's like, did I just miss this plane? And she goes, yep. And I was like, oh, okay. He was like, well, but there's crazy people that get on those airplanes, and you're like, and it's funny when they get angry, you're like, okay, you celebrate them getting kicked off. You're like, woo, we get a little peace and quiet, right? It's fascinating to me, but some misguided people, they're actually proud when they get upset with people. They brag about things like, man, I sure told them off or him off. I blasted them. They're not going to cross me again. I just tell it like it is. That's who I am. But bragging about anger, what it fascinates me is you don't hear people say, well, guess what, guys? I committed adultery today. I sure cheated my company this week on all kinds of stuff. You should see. It looks like my company's in my living room because I stole all their stuff. We don't brag about those. We may make excuses for our anger. We say things like, I'm a liar because my ancestors are from Germany. Or, of course, I lust. I have blonde hair. I mean, I can't help it, right? But anger, we don't do that with all the other sins. But anger, we blame our heritage. We blame the fact that we have red hair. We blame the fact that we're Irish. But anger is one of the first emotions that we face. As babies, when babies come out, they're not the happiest sometimes. When they're angry is when they're hungry, when they need to get changed, or when someone's holding them, or the wrong person is holding them. Like dad's holding them, and they're like, I don't want dad, I want mom. And so kids get angry, babies get angry, and we don't discipline the baby for being angry because it's a baby and they don't really know the root problem. We know the root problem of their anger. But anger is rarely the root problem. When you get angry when you are hurt. Physically or emotionally, think about it. You're hammering a nail and you hit your thumb and you go, oh man, that really hurt my thumb. I think that's going to leave a bruise. I know that probably that's what everyone says. Or when you put the trash can on Monday, you put it behind your car and you go, it's behind my car, and then you grab the kids and you back up into it and you're like, oh my goodness, I should have known. I've done that. So you're the only ones that don't do it. I do it, okay? That's just me. That's a Greg problem, okay. And my kids laugh every time I'm like, oh, I should have known it was there. Sometimes the source of hurt is also a memory. You may have a memory, something happened long ago that was never resolved, and so what happens is you get angry when something trivial happens, something maybe small happens. It kind of triggers it. It triggers it because there's an unresolved hurt that's there. And here's a principle that maybe you know, but we know this all too well. Hurting people, well, what do? They hurt people. So when people are hurting, sometimes they lash out at you, and it's not you, it's just that they're hurt as well. This next video will explain the reason you get angry. So watch this.
Good day and welcome to the 2022 Fill It, Don't Spill It World Championship. I'm your host and I am joined today by our two competitors, Mary Grace and Pastor Tim. Today's challenge is simple. Fill the cup and don't spill the water out of the top. Our competitors will spin the wheel and pick one of 7 containers that they will have to use to pour water into the glass. And the greatest challenge of them all, a cardboard box. By popular demand, Mary Grace will be going first. Spin that wheel. Mary Grace is dumping from the cardboard box. I can't wait to see it. Wow, she went very aggressive with the initial pour. Even brought in a little leaf. I can't believe it. I just can't believe it. The bag! The Ziploc bag! Mary Grace, your turn again. The water bottle. Go right ahead with the water bottle. Pastor Tim, here we go again. Let's see what you got. Ooh! I think it was on the spray bottle. You can't just get away with one spray. You gotta do it 3 sprays. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an official loser of the Fill It, Don't Spill It competition. But that means we have a winner. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Mary Grace, the champion. The loser gets a tub of water dumped on their head. Mary Grace, whenever you're ready.
So it's funny watching people fill up a cup, right? But that's what happens in marriage as well. Instead of working through conflict in a healthy way, you let frustration or trivial things add up and add up and add up until that cup overflows. Then you both lose your anger. You get angry when you're frustrated with people. You shouldn't be surprised by an explosion when you've not chosen to deal with the sparks. The third reason is when your self-esteem is low and you feel insecure. Your temperature starts to kind of overflow. Insecurity makes you misinterpret other people's motives. If you're feeling low and somebody doesn't notice you or say hello to you, well, you get upset about it. When you don't feel good about yourself, you don't feel good about others. And many of you suffer from anger. Maybe you lose your temper. You lose control. And when you do, you say things that you regret. Well, today we're going to finish our study of the lessons from Saul, a sad story about his anger and even the consequences. See, Saul was the king of Israel, but because of the sin and his mistakes, he wasn't going to stay king. David was a young and up-and-coming future leader of Israel. You see, being near to David made Saul feel jealous, frustrated, and even insecure. When David was around Saul, guess what Saul did? He lost his temper, and he also lost control. And it just didn't happen one time. In 1 Samuel 19:1, it says this, Saul told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David. Saul was angry, and he ordered David's death. Saul's son Jonathan was David's best friend. Could you imagine being Jonathan, being David's best friend? Jonathan managed to calm his father down in several different instances. In verse 6, it says, Saul listened to Jonathan, and he took this oath. He says, as surely as as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death. Well, guess what? It didn't last long. David won another key battle because God was with him. Saul once again became jealous. He became angry. And we get to verse 9. We go from 6 to 9. It says this, while David was playing the harp, Saul tried to pin him to the wall with a spear. But David eluded him as Saul drove the spear into the wall. Now, I don't know about temper tantrums, but I'd guess that's like, here's ours, and then Saul just, you start throwing spears at people. I mean, that's kind of like next level type thing. Jonathan would see how angry his dad was. And it wasn't safe when David was around. In 1 Samuel 20:24, it says, so David hid in the field, and when the new moon festival came, the king sat down to eat. He sat in the customary place by the wall opposite of Jonathan, and Abner sat next to him, next to Saul, but David's place was empty. Saul said nothing that day, for he thought something must have happened to David to make him ceremonially unclean. Surely he is unclean. But Saul noticed David. He noticed that he was gone. But he didn't say anything. In verse 27, it says, the next day, the second day of the month, David's place was empty again. Then Saul said to his son Jonathan, why hasn't the son of Jesse come to the meal, neither yesterday or today? Notice how Saul refers to David. He doesn't say David. He says, I've noticed the son of Jesse. This is the first time that Saul used the term. But it wasn't the last time. He didn't even say David's name. And if you want to check the temperature, now we know that's really not a good sign. Jonathan put the plan in action, and he told his dad a rehearsed lie. He said in verse 28, Jonathan answered, David earnestly asked me for permission to go to Bethlehem. He said, let me go because our family is observing a sacrifice in the town, and my brother has ordered me to be there. If I have found favor in your eyes, let me go to see my brothers. That is why he has not come to the king's table. Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan. He said to him, you son of a perverse and rebellious woman, don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother who bore you? I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a good conversation. In his anger, Saul turned on his son. He didn't just turn on his son, but he also insulted his wife in the process. He called his wife a perverse and rebellious woman, okay? I think even though you're the king, if you say whatever you say, that's still going to be on the couch duty type thing, okay? The other translations say that Saul called Jonathan the son of a whore. Remember, mom's sitting at the table. Mom's sitting at the table for a family meal. Could you imagine her reaction? Maybe King Saul just didn't look at his wife at that point. Like he knew, like he could tell the daggers from his wife at that point. But it had to have been tense at the king's dinner table. It didn't matter how much good food there was. It had to be tense. Saul was telling Jonathan, you're a rebel. You're not my son anymore. You sided with the enemy. You have shamed yourself, and you have shamed your mother. It's really true. Hurting people, they hurt people. And when you're angry, when you're out of control, there's almost always collateral damage. Sadly, it's usually the people that you love, you care about. See, your out of control temper hurts not just you, but it hurts your spouse, hurts your children, hurts your parents, your friends, your pastor, your coworker, and even the list goes on. Maybe you try to justify your anger, but there's no excuse. The changes affects your rage. Saul said this. He said, as long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Now send and bring him to me, for he must die. So Saul knew that David was the future king, but if he killed the future king, maybe he could hold on to power a little bit longer. Jonathan even tried to reason with his father, and he says, why should he be put to death? What has he done? Jonathan asked his father. What happened next is anger beyond belief. But Saul hurled his spear at him to kill him. So now he's not only trying to kill David at one point, now he's trying to kill his own son. And that's what out of control anger does. Saul tried to murder his own son at the dinner table in one meal. Saul called his wife a whore. He disowned his son, and he tried to kill him. I don't know what was on the food table at that point, but it was an incredibly expensive meal. But when Saul lost his temper, he also lost. He lost the respect of his family. They would never forget the words and the actions of an out-of-control, rage-filled, angry tyrant. Saul didn't just lose the respect of his son, but he lost the relationship with his son. As a dad of a son, I couldn't imagine the pain. Maybe some of you can, just because of that broken relationship with your children. It would hurt every day. Saul also lost the influence with his family, with his men, and in the kingdom. When a leader loses his cool, his followers never will see him the same way. Saul also lost a chance to leave a legacy. Saul could have approached things completely differently. He could have said, I'm grieved that my mistakes have cost me my kingdom, but I will mentor and train God's man to do a good job. I will support David, and I'll follow him, I'll love him, I'll respect him. Could have done all those things, but Saul could have apologized to God and to the people. If Saul had done that, we would have been probably talking about something very different. We'd talk about him with admiration and respect, but instead we're learning the life from a loser. I've heard it said often, I just have a temper. I don't get mad, I just get even. The question is it worth it? You see, anger is expensive. It costs you far more than you realize in that moment. If you could see the cost, you would control yourself. I want to show you some of the effects of anger. Because of anger and outbursts, guess what? You destroy meaningful relationships. If you honestly look back over your life, you can see all the relationships that are gone because of you, because you couldn't control your temper. Some of you have destroyed your marriage, your family with your anger, but it's time to stop the destruction. Because of your anger, guess what? You lose influence. You've lost influence in your home. You've lost influence in your business, everything you have in your life, but you always found a way to blame somebody else. Or maybe you're on the other side of it where you've lost a lot of things. And you think, well, if I wouldn't have done this wouldn't have happened. But it was because of someone else's anger is why you're in the position that you're in. You just were that innocent bystander. You were that Jonathan who was trying to help his friend, and it was because of maybe your dad or your mom's anger that brought you to this place. It wasn't Jonathan's fault that his dad was angry. It was Saul's fault. And as a result of your anger, you're filled with regrets. Many of you may be dealing with regrets. You don't look back on your outbursts with pride. You desperately wish you could have taken back those hurtful words. But because of your anger, you leave a destructive legacy. Maybe you're leaving a legacy, whether you want it or not, that there are families with mom and dad who have horrible anger issues. Guess what? The kids are going to deal with anger issues. I remember as a kid, my dad I've had an explosive temper tantrums, and I remember my dad going, Greg, guess what? We have some generational curses that we got to get rid of in this family. And I'm like, okay, what's that? Our tempers. And like my dad would always call me Esau because he would go, Greg, you would sell your birthright. You'd sell your birthright for something. And so like for a long time, I remember sitting by my bed, my dad praying for our tempers. He had temper, I had a temper. But guess what? And it eventually spoiled one. I remember being married for 9 months, and we had this nice little baby boy. And all of a sudden, I got so mad. I can't remember what I was doing, but I remember I was doing something in the bathroom, trying to figure it out. I got so mad. I took my drill. I just chunked it down on the ground. It's like a volcano. And then my wife came in, and she said, I don't ever want to see that ever again. Because she knew that there's a little boy that could pick up all my traits. And that's when I really started to really pray about it even harder, because that's what I didn't want to pass on to my kids. I didn't want to pass on a destructive legacy. See, their legacy, sometimes when we struggle with those, is horribly destructive. Because of our anger, you're distanced from God. See, your anger costs the intimacy with God. Every time you try to lose control, you distance yourself from your Heavenly Father. So how do we help? How is there help for hotheads? See, when you're angry, guess what? Our mouths run 1,000,000 miles an hour. And you say things, and you're like, "Ooh, I wish I wouldn't." Yeah, as you're saying it, you're like trying to get it back, but guess what? It's too late. Proverbs 14:7 says, "A quick-tempered man does foolish things." Proverbs 29:11 says, "A fool gives vent to his anger, but a wise man keeps himself under control." So watch your words. The first one would be stop. Just stop and think before you speak. That's why we got 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? We gotta stop before we speak. The emotional high of anger is tempting. Turning our words into daggers, then seeing them hit their mark can be quite an adrenaline rush. But guess what? Is it worth it? Is it worth it to lose that friend over that one thing that you're about to say? Or the broken relationships, the lost respect, are they worth the few minutes of just that being brilliant and a little bit in control? Stop and think before you speak. Don't let your out-of-control emotions rule you. So first step is stop. Step 2 is to look. When you get angry, the only thing you see is yourself. Anger is a selfish emotion. You don't see anything or anyone else. To control your anger, you have to look at the situation, not from your point of view, but from God's point of view. Look at God's point of view rather than your point of view. See, God's view is so much different than ours. It's longer than ours. God sees past the brief moment of anger and into the future where you're going to need the person that you're angry at, or they're going to need you. See, God sees past the emotion to the soul. He sees a hurting person who needs healing. You see, I'm concerned about the church in America. The church is becoming known for being having anger instead of love. I've never met someone who came to Jesus because of an angry rant and yelling at somebody. I've never met it like, "Get saved now," or I'm gonna just take you out. I listen to these devotionals every morning from Pastor Jim Cymbala from the Brooklyn Tabernacle, and he told this story of an anger rage once, and he was in college, and he got mad at this guy, and the guy, his roommate in college, he threw the Bible, and he got up, and he just beat him to death. I mean, he just beat him up, and then he said this, "I never could tell him about Jesus after that." And I thought, oh, well, I guess if so our anger never allows us to tell someone about Jesus. See, God sees a soul that matters. God sees a person that needs to find a way to the kingdom. So you see an offense, but guess what? God sees an opportunity. We must be mature enough to look into the mirror and see the hurts. If somebody insults you, somebody criticizes you or puts you down, don't look for a fight, but just be mature enough to say, well, I'm going to refuse to let that bother me. I'm going to choose to not be offended. Proverbs 19:11 says, "A man's wisdom gives him patience. It is his glory to overlook an offense." See, being offended is a choice. You can choose not to be offended, but instead to move forward into love. Proverbs 12:16 says, "A fool shows his annoyance at once, but a prudent man overlooks an insult." So the frustrations of life are going to come whether you get angry or not. See, anger doesn't prevent the frustration. We just got to look past the person who cut you off in traffic. Instead of making a raging fool of yourself, maybe we just pray for that person. Maybe we look at it from God's point of view, and that's going to change the way we think. Maybe that's going to set you free. You can trust God to handle things. See, God is big enough to handle the person who cut you off in traffic, or the kid with the smart mouth, or the coworker who took your lunch. God is big enough to handle those people who won't quit posting bad things about you. God is working in their hearts, and their minds of people every day. And he's going to handle them way better than you will. So we got to stop. We got to look. We also got to listen. Several years ago, we did on Mother's Day, we did a single mother's lunch. And after the service, we had tables all set up through here, and we were feeding our single moms, just showing them God's love. And there was this lady who was like, hey, I need to talk to the pastor. I tried to tell someone, I was like, they're the pastor. But I guess since I preached, they assumed I was the pastor. But I remember she's like, okay, and she's mad. I'm like, oh boy. I'm like, oh, what's going to happen? So we take her in this room, and there's a window in that room, and I think everyone was like seeing this and seeing that and seeing this and just telling us everything we did wrong, and we don't love people, we don't do this and that and this. I'm like, oh man, okay, she just give me the what for. And then she was done. I think Miss Linda thought there was going to be like a fight or something. She started removing her earrings, and I was like, oh man. So I had like bodyguards. I had bodyguards. All the ladies were ready. Like I was like, oh man. I was like, okay, relax, okay. And then I said this, how are you doing? Are you okay? And then tears welled up in her eyes. And she was like, and she starts talking about at 13 years old, she started smoking weed, and she can't kick this addiction, and she's doing this and that, and she's just now crying, and I prayed for her, and just, she never came back. But guess what? Because we chose we chose to overlook the offense, that she had an encounter with God at that point. So we got to listen, because some people, they're struggling with stuff. They just may vent at you, but guess what? They're not mad at you. They're just hurting. And so we got to not be tempted to fight anger with anger. Maybe an obnoxious, irritating person is often a person with a deep need. They're wanting to be loved, and they're wanting attention. So we got to listen for the need. We got to listen to the person and listen to the Holy Spirit. When we're in a tough conversation, we got to ask God to help us understand when the other person is coming. We got to tune into the Holy Spirit and help shift our perspective away from ourselves and into Him. James 1:19 says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. If you do not do the first two, the third will come automatically. If you are quick to listen and slow to speak, it is almost automatic that you are slow to become angry. So if we stop, we look, we listen, and then we pray. Ask God to help you with your anger. Admit it is a problem and ask for assistance in helping change it. We got to repent from the sin of an out-of-control temper. Stop, look, listen. Well, that's easy to remember. But there's one more step. There's one more step to take, and it's apologize. Apologize to the people that you have hurt. Admit that you are out of control and you lost your temper. Don't make any excuses. So to help you, I'm gonna give you 3 components to an effective apology. Okay, three. Here's an effective apology. Okay, it says, number 1, I'm sorry. It's my fault. That should have never happened. Understand the hurt that I've caused. I'm embarrassed by my lack of control. So in your apology, you got to communicate that your sorrow openly to the person that you have wounded. Don't expect them to assume that you are sorrowful about what you did. Tell them you're sorry. Tell them you just got to tell them. You got to share with them. When you understand how you have hurt someone else, it should result in brokenness, a deep sorrow for your own wrongs. So when you say sorry, then you admit that you're wrong. You say, I was wrong. No excuses. I was wrong, but my sugar level was low. Like sometimes, like I was, don't follow it with that. I was wrong. Don't blame. No talking about what they did that made, when you said that thing, that one thing, that made me mad. No, don't. Just, I am sorry. The principle is excuses invalidate the apologies. So don't bother apologizing if you're going to just make the excuses. People are going to remember the sad excuse, and they're going to forget your apology. They don't care why you did it. They don't care. All they do is they care why that you did it. All too often, apologies just are a defense. Apologies are a defense, not an apology. Don't fall into the trap. Just apologize. Say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. What can I do to make it right? And prepare to do what they ask. If you miss one of those three components, your apology isn't completely effective at all. If you're from a long line of hotheads, or maybe you're a hothead in recovery, I would say I'm probably a hothead in recovery. I'm just going to be straight with you guys. And there's moments where, man, I'm like, man, I'm angry, and I got to go, oh, Lord, help me. And so I'm there with you guys. When I looked at this message, I thought, oh, good Lord, this is not from a place of strength. But I want to encourage you, let's break the cycle. Let's break the cycle, just like Jonathan did. That's the thing. Jonathan broke the cycle. Let's be cycle breakers. Too often we get stuck in the cycle of just repeating what we have grown up with. It's time for us to break those cycles. Break those cycles in our life. The cycle. You don't have to be what you've grown up in. You can break that cycle. And you know what? It's hard to be that first generation of cycle breaker because it's hard. But guess what? You keep doing it. Guess what? It may be hard for you, but guess what? Think about your children when you start having kids. They're not gonna repeat the cycle that you're in because you chose to break the cycle. So let's break the cycle. Let's be cycle breakers today.